So we're gonna stick with the topic Fit for 50 crisis, and we that's the question. Fit for 55, and then in crisis. That's the idea we have. Thank you very much. And we want to ask: is the Green Deal up to the task? And we're going to speak to someone who's very much in the center of everything that's going on, considering this question. A warm welcome to Ditte Juul Jørgensen. She's Director-General at the Directorate-General Energy. Warm welcome.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for inviting me.
So, you've been listening to the conversation we just had. Do you agree with what has been said? Do you feel like we're on track?
Yes, I think we are on track. We're not deterred by the crisis, by the challenges we're facing, and I think if anything, the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 are even more necessary, even more relevant, even more central for us now in light of the energy crisis and in light of the global developments. So in a way, it is not just Fit for 55; it's really fit for purpose. Maybe a few words about that, if you allow. The Green Deal is essentially about reaching climate neutrality in 2050, setting our 2030 target of 55, and then in the field of energy, outlining how do we get there. And there are two key components there, well, three key components there. The first is we need to reduce our energy consumption overall by energy efficiency measures. And we have legislation on that, and we've made proposals for how to strengthen our regulatory framework to further push forward energy efficiency investments. The second pillar is renewable energy. So the future energy system must have much higher levels of renewable than what we've seen so far. So we need to accelerate the rollout of renewables across the European Union. And then the third aspect, and I'm really here in the energy part of the Green Deal and Fit for 55. There are obviously many other regulatory aspects, but in the energy field, the third part is a more integrated energy system and a more electrified energy system, because the electrification is necessary for more energy efficient appliances, more energy efficient energy uses, and the system integration is a way to use other energy vectors, other energy carriers, to replace some of the fossil molecules we have in the system. And of course here, green hydrogen has a very central role in particular. So that's the short version of the energy aspects of the Green Deal. There are many others. There's decarbonization of gas, there's energy performance of buildings, there are many things, but I can come back to that. And if you then look at Repower EU, the plan we adopted this spring to essentially reduce our dependence on Russian fossil, get rid of Russian fossil in our energy system, then Repower EU is completely aligned with the Green Deal in the sense that Repower EU has three pillars: reduce, renew, replace. So reduce our energy consumption through energy efficiency, but also in the immediate term through energy savings. It's absolutely necessary. It's a critical element of this. Renew, more renewable energy and faster. So we've made proposals to accelerate, in particular, permitting processes. And we've also made proposals to increase our level of ambition by 2030 or for 2030. And then replace is a necessary element in the sense that we still need molecules in our system. In addition to the electricity, we're going to need some form of molecules. And what we need to do there is to replace, to put it very simply, the Russian fossil molecules with molecules from other suppliers. So that can be natural gas from other suppliers, as we have seen this year already. And it can be other forms of molecule, including green hydrogen or other clean energy vectors. So there's a complete alignment both in our short-term, our crisis management, what do we need to do right now, with our longer-term strategic objectives. And I think as we act in this crisis, it is critical not to forget the longer-term framework, the longer-term strategic objectives, and really do everything we can to align those objectives.
You mentioned the framework. You also mentioned the regulatory effects. We've been hearing quite a bit today that the regulatory aspect of things is actually something that leads to sometimes more problems than they're actually trying to solve. First of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, what could we do to make processes faster?
So I think, first of all, the objective of the regulatory framework is to facilitate, is to enable. And we working on regulation and helping to establish that framework, that's what we have in mind. That's what we aim to do when our processes are designed to make that possible. So just to maybe note a slightly different take on the overall role of regulation in the green transition. It's necessary. We have seen, for example, that putting in place ambitious targets for renewables and energy efficiency has really helped drive forward the change and accelerate the change, because it creates certainty for investors. They know that if they go into green projects, into renewable projects, well, then they do that in a stable regulatory environment. But where I fully agree is that we sometimes see that the processes linked to the regulatory framework can slow down. And we've seen that in the field of permitting, where permitting processes in a number of European member states, including in Germany, simply take a very, very long time and stand in the way of the rollout of renewables and of the acceleration there. So the way we have approached it at European level is to create clear regulatory requirements, so putting in place maximum timeframes for permitting processes, for administrative processes. We have provided guidance and best practices that we can share, that we have shared with member states, with governments, to say this is how you can organize it in order not to have these regulatory delays in the processes. And we've now taken it further in suggesting really specific regulatory kind of carve-outs, go-to zones that will help make it faster to roll out the renewables that are needed. What we see here in the crisis, given circumstances, is, as I've said, a need to accelerate the renewable rollout even more. We need it here and now. And then we've seen from some parts of Europe a suggestion that can we do more? Could we put in place a further crisis measure that really focuses on facilitating investments and establishment of renewables? And I think those are really interesting ideas that we need to look at to avoid that there is a regulatory bottleneck somewhere in the system, because we simply don't have the time for that. We don't have the time because of the energy crisis, but we also don't have the time because of the climate crisis. And again, those two point in the same direction in terms of what is it we need to do.
If you now look at it from the outside perspective, and it's difficult when you're inside, do you sometimes agree with the criticism, or do you feel like you have plans? You've just mentioned them. You have ideas. Do you feel like they are picked? They've been used often enough, easily enough, or do you feel like sometimes it gets lost in translation? You offer them to countries, and those countries don't just go along with it.
Well, I think all governments at the moment, we are in an energy crisis. The crisis has significant impacts on our industry, on our competitiveness, on our manufacturing industry, in particular, energy-intensive industry. It has impacts on our citizens, on households, and it has impacts therefore overall on our economy. And so if you look at it from the perspective of both the business, but also national governments and citizens, it's clear that the challenges really come together in a very intense way. It's felt quite dramatically. We see a number of industrial facilities slowing down or even shutting down their manufacturing facilities because of the high energy prices. And so I think what is important is that we have conversations that place the overall targets, the overall objectives, and the regulatory efforts that are ongoing in the context of that reality, because that's the reality we have to address. That's the crisis. Those are the challenges that we have to help find solutions to. And that is, again, the thinking behind the Repower EU. It is not just saying we have to reduce our dependence on Russian fossil. It is really trying to put together a program of actions that can help our businesses and our consumers do that and help adapt. We were already in a transition, but that transition is being further pressured and squeezed and accelerated because of the energy crisis and because of the Russian war in Ukraine. And so while we keep, once again, the long-term strategic objective, we have to make sure that the way we get there also responds to the security interest as well as to the competitiveness concerns that are very genuine concerns and very genuine challenges for industry in particular.
When you have those conversations, do you feel like we are more aligned now on those decisions on the European level than before the war, or is it not more difficult to find a common ground?
It's a very good question. I think the challenging circumstances with the Russian war in Ukraine, with the energy crisis, with the climate crisis being increasingly visible across Europe, I think minds are focused. And so in that sense, there is a very clear common purpose across the European Union, both on the geopolitical side of things, but also on what does it mean, what do we need to do. Then, of course, the national circumstances differ from member state to member state. You have some member states, for example, that are heavily dependent on Russian gas, others less so. And so the response in member states, of course, reflects the reality again on the ground. But on the whole, I would say there is a very clear sense of common purpose, a very clear sense of European unity being absolutely critical in our response. So let us find a common response across the European Union. That's what I hear from capitals, and that means we're working in a challenging environment, but we're also really standing together as much as possible, because the best solutions to a number of these challenges are European in nature.
When we use that kind of force, meaning the energy that, and I'm talking like human energy, brain energy, right now, to maybe even be more ambitious. Maybe in the last minute and a half that we have, can we use the momentum to skyrocket our ambitions in the energy crisis?
Yeah, I think that is a good point. And we are, to some extent, in the sense that we are hiking up our ambitions for renewables. We're hiking up our ambitions for energy efficiency. We're bringing forward very focused measures on demand reduction across the European Union, on solidarity across the European Union. But I think you're right. I think we need to think even further, and again, bear these strategic objectives in mind as we address the crisis, to see what more is needed. Because we need the changes, we need to make the change, but in a way the change is also coming to us. It's being imposed on us because of the energy crisis and because of the war. And so we do need to think ahead and be ambitious. And what I've heard from industry, including from Business Europe just now, is very encouraging in that context, essentially saying, well, we do have the European industry has what it takes. We have the ability, we need to put it together. And our job, including in Brussels, is then to make sure that the framework for doing that is there, again, that we become enablers and facilitators, and that what is needed is in place so that we can approach this in the best possible way.
Okay, we're gonna watch what's gonna happen. I'm super curious to see where we're gonna land with the ambitious ambition level. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.